Everyone here just saw me get shot in the head, fall down dead, and then get up again. I think I'm past blending in. It's okay. I want them to see the Wolverine coming. Today on the Comic Book Report, the all-new Wolverine Omnibus. Stick around and check it out. Greetings, bub. My name is Dominic, and you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today we have a real treat in the form of Tom Taylor's incredible all-new Wolverine Omnibus. I knew very little about this run before I got this book, but wow, am I so happy I gave it a read. So sit back, relax, and let's go ahead and jump into today's review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The all-new Wolverine was written by Tom Taylor and penciled primarily by David Lopez and Juan Cabal, but there are several illustrators on this title. The issues collected in this omnibus were first published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2015. The volume itself collects All New Wolverine, issues 1 through 35, All New Wolverine Annual, number 1, and Generations, Wolverine and All New Wolverine, issue 1. This oversized hardcover comes in at 862 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the collection as well as commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and with that out of the way, here is the collection itself, the all-new Wolverine Omnibus. Like the other Marvel omnibuses, this is an oversized hardcover collection with glossy print pages. And I have to say, I really liked the cover design for this. We got a great reprinting of issue 1 on the standard edition cover here, a beautiful spine, as well as some fun artwork along the back. It doesn't have the issue covers on the back like some of the omnibuses do, especially for the Silver and Bronze Age collections, but this is still a very great modern omnibus design. Now I'm going to go ahead and give you a look under the dust jacket for that art as well. Like I said, you can see the dust jacket itself. I really like the print on that. And overall, the under the dust jacket art is also just fantastic, as we got some all-new Wolverine art there. Really not much to complain about here. I'm really into the design. The white omnibus is also kind of fun to see on my shelf. It kind of mixes it up a little bit. Let's go ahead and take one final look there at the under the dust jacket art. As I said, I was wowed by this collection, and just looking at how it's designed even, you can see why. The first impressions were a lot, and I was really satisfied with this product. And we'll give you a quick look at the binding there before diving into the collection itself. Not much of an eye, but it's bound pretty well. Gutter loss, not too bad. Now let's go ahead and get into the collection itself. Right away, as we go ahead and open up the book, I love the yellow end pages. It really adds a splash of color to this book that I already think is really beautifully designed. The front matter is also really well laid out, and then we just dive right into the run itself with the all-new Wolverine issue 1. We don't have any kind of previously on, we don't have any setup, we are just right in the middle of the action here, but I really didn't feel as a new reader that I missed out on really anything. It was just a high-flying, high-octane adventure from the moment one. Laura Kinney, X-23, the all-new Wolverine, is such an engaging character right out of the gate, and I could tell from this first issue that I was absolutely going to love this omnibus. But before going deeper into this book itself, I'd love to take a moment and just explain how I first came to this book. So when I started to get back into comics in the last couple years, I had been hearing a ton about Tom Taylor, who previously I had really only read the beginning of the Injustice series, which I really enjoyed. Well, fast forward to this past year, and I've been able to enjoy Tom Taylor's Deceased and some of his Nightwing run, and I heard that he wrote a series called The All-New Wolverine, which was already kind of an interesting point for me, as I had read some of the early X-23 stuff. I think it's called Innocence Lost, and maybe Target 23, these little trade paperbacks I borrowed from a friend. And they were my introduction to her character, the clone of Wolverine, and I was really fascinated by X-23, and I really enjoyed that character. I thought it was fun and kind of refreshing even. Well, fast forward to this past year, I hear that she took on the mantle of Wolverine at one point, thus this series, the All-New Wolverine with X-23, aka Laura Kinney, and I have to say, I'm really happy with this setup. I really enjoyed her character as X-23, and I was excited to see her approach as the all-new Wolverine. That being said, a lot has obviously transpired since those early trade paperback collections I had read with the origins of X-23, so there's a lot of interstitial time that has passed, and frankly, I don't really know what happened to the character between those early appearances and this book here. But I found that I was not too worse for wear for not knowing that, because I think that the all-new Wolverine is very accessible to new readers as an entry point for this character and certainly for this series. So anyway, I hear about this title and I ended up getting this omnibus as a Christmas present from my in-laws. Thanks again if you're listening. And I devoured this thing. I read the whole omnibus within a couple days. And I've been really eager to review it for this channel. I just hadn't made the time until now, so I really hope you enjoy. As far as the content of this omnibus goes, it is strongly written from moment one to the very last pages of the collection. To my knowledge, Tom Taylor wrote just about everything in this volume, which obviously leads to a lot of consistency in the writing, which I really loved. As far as the art goes, there were a handful of artists throughout this book, but I have to say the art was always really sharp, and the character models I always found to be fairly consistent throughout, even as it changed hands. Even though I would have preferred one penciler, I think that this collection really benefited from having a couple artists who maintained a similar vision for this series. The collection itself starts with the all-new Wolverine discovering during kind of a terrorist threat that there are more clones of Wolverine running around, more female clones of Wolverine, I should say. This springboards into a huge conspiracy and adventure where the all-new Wolverine, Laura Kinney, is trying to track down these other clones and kind of figure out what's happening, where they're coming from, if she can bring them to justice, and if she can kind of build a relationship with her sort of sisters. Anyway, frankly, it's all very exciting, and the clones of Wolverine are all pretty interesting and also pretty unique in this first arc, and I really thought that this was a fun take on a clone saga kind of deal, and for my money, handled better than Spider-Man, in my opinion, even though I do have a soft spot in my heart for the Spider-Man clone saga. I do think that this Wolverine run approaches cloning with a more modern take, and maybe a stronger, more consistent hand as far as the writing goes. Out of this story with the clones, we're introduced to the youngest of the X-23 clones, which is Gabby. She ends up having some of Laura Kinney's healing factor, and she eventually goes on to adopt the codename Honey Badger as her superhero name. But Gabby kind of becomes a little sister to Laura Kinney throughout this run. They also end up rescuing / adopting a physical Wolverine that they named Jonathan. So they have kind of adventures, Laura Kinney, Gabby, and Jonathan, the actual Wolverine, and they stop bad guys, fight crime, and they have all sorts of adventures throughout this omnibus, and it's a lot of fun. There's a surprising amount of humor and levity in this book, balanced with an unbelievable amount of action, drama, suspense, and kind of conspiracy thriller all rolled into one. Throughout this book as well, we have them fighting off against the Taskmaster, we have them fighting Dr. Doom in a kind of dystopian future at the end of the book, and along the way we have team-ups with Squirrel Girl and Ghost Spider, the Spider-Gwen, and so much more. Another character that pops up throughout this omnibus is the kind of old man Logan from another universe. I don't really know what's going on with that character either. I haven't read some of the Old Man Logan series beyond the original miniseries, so I'm not sure if it's supposed to be that same Logan from Old Man Logan, but there's clearly a lot of character history there before this omnibus as well. I was left to kind of fill in the gaps myself. You don't need to know a lot. Like I said, Tom Taylor did an excellent job making this collection very accessible to first-time readers without having to know a lot of the back history. But there are some characters in here that I had not read in other incarnations, so it was kind of interesting to read them for the first time. There's a lot of moving pieces in this omnibus, but like I said, overall, a very strong narrative that you didn't really need to do too much homework to really just jump in and enjoy all the way through. At the beginning of this omnibus, obviously our Logan from the 616 universe is dead, ergo why Laura Kinney took on the mantle of the All-New Wolverine. And even though he's gone, his legacy and his memory and him as a character, it's still really felt within the context of the pages of All-New Wolverine. There are a lot of meaningful flashbacks, moments where Laura Kinney as well just reflects on Wolverine. And with the inclusion of Old Man Logan, we also get kind of a parallel version of Wolverine. So overall, that character also feels very present within the pages of All-New Wolverine, while really allowing for Laura Kinney to shine in her own right as the new Wolverine. I think that they did a really fantastic job here. Laura, even though she is so closely related to Wolverine, really feels like such a distinctive character from Logan. And I think that there is kind of maybe a greater or at least more apparent sense of compassion that Laura Kinney has. There's also a lot of guilt that she carries for her past and kind of where she came from. And it's just fascinating to explore that. Even though there are some similarities in the origins between Wolverine and the All-New Wolverine, there are a lot of striking differences. I think some of my favorite arcs in this collection had to do with her past and the people from the program that experimented and helped create her. There's a lot there that I could go into that I'll spare you so that you can read for yourself. But there's such great, rich storytelling in this book. There's one particular scene I do want to share, though, that was pretty striking, where you realize that there's a kind of pheromone response that Laura Kinney has that makes her go savage into that kind of berserker rage that Wolverine himself gets into, where it's kind of just blind anger and violence without much thought. And there's this story arc where basically they drop it, I think, from a plane, this like pheromone in this city, and essentially she goes crazy and unfortunately murders most of this town. And it's so heart-wrenching and just a punch in the gut to see her lose control and be completely unable to stop herself. And that leads to all these conflicts, both in that arc and further down the line in this omnibus. But I think it's one great example of how this character is so distinct and how they really rely on some of the richness of what makes the character unique and where she came from. And it's explored so well with Tom Taylor, where again, I didn't feel like I needed to do homework reading to enjoy this collection, but I feel like he really nodded to the history of this character and even of Logan Wolverine as well. Really masterfully done, and this was such a fun ride from beginning to end. You can see as well there's some Deadpool issues in here. I think that these were all a lot of fun, especially Deadpool's dynamic with Gabby. Just a lot of fun hijinks in those issues, really entertaining. There was also issues with the Brood that were pretty fascinating. And this really leads to another comment I have about this omnibus as a whole. There are several just completely independent story arcs in this. You don't feel like it gets bogged down in crossovers or events, but you do feel like you have a great handful of distinctive story arcs within this collection. Yes, it builds to broader story arcs, and yes, there's a lot of payoffs as you finish the whole volume, but there's a lot of independent, great-sized stories throughout, where I feel like even if you didn't love the first story, you might really love the second story, and so on from there, on and on and on. And I think that there's a lot of, Tom Taylor kind of flexing his muscles here, where we didn't just get the same kind of narrative. There's a consistency, of course, but there are also unique, almost episodic story arcs throughout. And that's really to this volume's strength. I feel like I got to read so many stories for the price of this one volume. And I really liked that. I think when I read, for example, Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four run, while I really loved it, it did really feel like the whole run was for one master narrative. And I think that that's an area where Hickman really shines. It was really well paid off, and there were little interstitial stories throughout, but everything kind of served one main vision, one main thrust of that run completely. And while I feel like the All-New Wolverine always had a sense of where it was going, and there was a really strong, great narrative throughout, as I've mentioned, there were a lot of just great individual story arcs. And again, it just really made me feel like I got my bang for my buck, and I liked that that's what this series really was. My only real complaint about this collection, as we reach the end here, you can see some of the bonus materials, the only real complaint I had was I felt like it was done too soon. Honestly, I wish the Tom Taylor run of All-New Wolverine was twice the length, just because I wanted more stories in his world. But I feel like he left on top, and he left me wanting more. And as a reader, could I really have asked for more than that? And with our collection at its end, it's time to give it a grade. For the incredible Tom Taylor's epic series, The All-New Wolverine, which includes an incredibly grounded and compelling cast of characters, consistent art, and a fun collection of stories, The Comic Book Report has to give The All-New Wolverine Omnibus an A. To me, this is a must-read for a modern comic, particularly if you enjoy Wolverine, the X-Men, or Tom Taylor in general. Have you read The All-New Wolverine? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you've read by Tom Taylor that you've enjoyed. And until next time, this has been The Comic Book Report. Don't forget to give this video a like, or check out some of my other videos, and have a good one.